morning students. Today we are going to see about information sources. In our current technological society, changes are occurring at a rapid pace. One of the most evident changes that affects our lives in the area of communication. Not only we rely heavily on traditional print media as a source of information, but we are also becoming increasingly aware of and depend on non-print communication forms. Definition. According to terminology of documentation, UNESCO, an information source means the source from which an individual gets information to fulfill his needs. Information sources. In olden days, only documents like books and periodicals constituted the collection of library up to the 21st century. Paper or print medium dominated the world of information sources. The present century witnessed notable change in the information transfer. Apart from the paper or print medium, the non-paper, non-print, non-book materials are also used as information sources. Types of information sources. There are various sources of information which are broadly classified into two categories. They are documentary sources and non-documentary sources. Further, documentary sources are divided into three categories: primary sources, secondary sources, tertiary sources. Like that, non-documentary sources are also divided into two types: formal sources and informal sources. Primary sources. Primary sources of information are the first published records of original research or a new application or a new interpretation of an old idea. Examples of primary sources are periodicals, research monographs, patents, standards, trade literature, research reports, dissertations, and unpublished sources like laboratory notebooks, memoranda, diaries, letter to and from a particular individual, company files, internal research papers, inscriptions on tombstones, portraits, oral stories, oral history, coins are all comes under unpublished sources. Secondary sources. Secondary sources are sources which are either compiled from or refer to primary sources of information. Examples: secondary periodicals, reviews, indexing and abstracting periodicals, reference books and translations. Tertiary sources. Tertiary sources of information contain information distilled and collected from primary and secondary sources. The main function of the tertiary sources is to help the researchers to find out the primary and secondary sources. Bibliography of bibliographies, directories, guides to literature are all examples of tertiary sources. Non-documentary sources. Non-documentary sources of information form a major part of communication exclusively in the field of science and technology. There are two kinds of non-documentary sources: formal and non-formal sources. Electronic sources. Electronic resources are materials in digital format accessible electronically. Types of electronic resources: e-books, e-journals, e-conference proceedings, databases, CDs, DVDs, e-reports, e-maps, e-pictures, e-thesis, e-newspapers. E-book. An e-book is a book made available in digital form consisting of text, images or both, readable on the flat panel display of computers or other electronic devices. E-journal. The modern world depends upon the information for social, economic, scientific and technological development. Normally, periodicals are the providers of this information. Periodicals is defined as a literary publication, magazines, etc. An electronic journal is a periodical publication which is published in electronic format, usually on the internet. Use of information sources. To update with latest information in relevant field, to avoid duplication of research in the same area, to enable the researcher in getting more information in his chosen area, to furnish background information to understand a subject new or unfamiliar, to supply necessary answers to specific queries, to offer a fruitful path of information. These are